But for digital sensor, it's a fixed value. Great. On the highlight level, the blue curve of the digital sensor slope is 0. But film keeps on increasing. Right? So that's what you're interested in the slope, not the absolute value. So the way to read it is kind of looking at the x-axis values where it stops responding. So if you kind of look at the x-axis, how much you can, respond to light, that's what will tell you how much latitude that particular medium has. Okay? Oh. Yes.
You were saying that in the past 2 to 3 years, you've seen more digital filmmaking coming into place.
Yes.
So, how are the filmmakers? Have you seen any previous examples where, any digital filmmaking where the scenes are more in the dark, but still we have made the movie?
Sure. Sure. So, digital filmmaking, when it first came in, had what is called the video look. All of them must have heard it. And said, it has a video look. What it is? Video look has 3 characteristics. It has very deep fields because the sensor was smaller. The actual sensor was smaller than the film. So I can go through the thing and show you that as you make the sensor smaller, your depth of field goes up. Which means everything from here to eternity will be in focus. And that's precisely what you don't want in film. The whole idea of movie making is actually to isolate. You show the surrounding and you isolate a person or a character or a thing. In order to do that, you need to control your depth of field. So sometimes you might want to shoot with a very shallow depth of field, like I want to shoot these 2 guys, and I want to show that this guy is not paying any attention to me. So I want to, go to him and make sure that he is in focus and he is not. I cannot do that if my camera has no depth of field. I mean, if my camera has infinite depth of field, then no matter what I do, both of them are in focus. Right? So that's the point I'm trying to make, that with the video look was that everything is in focus. This you see in TV. If you see a TV program versus if you watch a movie, you immediately see very focus. Flat light and everything is in focus. In film, it's graduated light and you choose your subjects. So that's the first thing. Second is, video used to be very grainy. And by grainy, what I mean is that there is a lot of contrast. So it almost jumped. There was no smoothness. So that jumping nature, that very contrasty look, is absolutely opposed to what a film look is. The film look is, what you see yesterday, when you saw any film you see, it has a washed out look. That washed out look you could not get in video. Now with the sensor, notice, a digital sensor that's used by, say, Red or Spike Arri or Sony is same size or even bigger than the size of a film. A Red is about 27 millimeter by 14 millimeter. That's bigger than the actual imaging area in a film, in a 3-spot film. Okay, now you are doing apples to apples comparison. And the comparison, Blackmagic camera has half the size of the sensor. We talked about cost. That's where the cost difference comes in. So Blackmagic, you can make it look, but inherently it will give you less of a cinematic look than what, say, Red or Arri will do. Purely because of the size. Then there are other factors as well. And the third thing that has happened is that digital video used to come out in 8-bit systems. It's 8 bits. Nowadays, you're shooting out 16 bits. So essentially, you're capturing a much wider latitude scene than what you could do in the old video. So which is why when you look at the 2005, 2006 digital pictures, they look crappy. And that's what Red did, that he brought in a practical replacement for film with the same kind of look, with certain limitations which are being overcome as we speak. But he brought the film look to digital. All right, good. I'm glad that you clarified. I'm going to skip over some of these. I'm going to skip this over as well. It's going great technical, and I can discuss this in detail if anybody has questions. I want to talk about one interesting, important thing which will relate back to what we just, the curve that we saw. And that's called the S-curve. One of the things that has happened is that the range of the display is still very limited. It's about 10, 11 bits. But your scene may have 16, 17 bits or stops. How do you fit a 16-bit data, let's say, where each bit corresponds to a stop, let's say, to an 11-bit system? So one you can do is to chop it off at the top, but that's no good. You don't want to do that. There's no point in making a 16-bit system and then display only 11 bits of those. That's not good. What do? What you do is what is called by this S-curve. So our eye, as I said, our eye is a very logarithmic sensor where it responds more to equal increments. So when you double the amount of light, you go through doubling of light, you perceive those to be doubly as much bright. It's not a linear sensor. So what it means is that when you're at the top end, you don't need to represent those data, those digital values, with as much resolution or as much fine steps as you needed to do when you're in the mid-range. Okay, so what it means is that doing a linear display is a wrong thing. You want to put some kind of a log curve. Because at the top end, when you're in the bright areas, our eye is not that sensitive. Because our eye also has a logarithmic response to it. So what you're going to do is, as you see here, that at the top end, I'm going to put an additional nonlinear. I'm going to put a log curve or some kind of an S-curve. Now what kind of S-curve you choose varies from person to person, from software to software, in this case from camera company to camera company. Everybody has their own. This is where the color science comes in. This is where the black magic comes in. This is where the art comes in, which is why we still have a job. Which is why there is a director and not a robot shooting the movie. Maybe one of these days a director won't be needed. A robot will pick up pictures. Look left, take a picture. Similarly at the bottom end, you don't need that much information. When you're in darkness, it doesn't matter whether you know exactly whether something is twice as less bright as another spot. You just need to know that this area is darker than this area. But the absolute values are not essential. So you put a probe. Now the film, the great thing about film is that it automatically did it. It automatically had that shape, that S shape that told you earlier. With film, with digital, what you're doing is that now that we have 16 bits of range, no longer 12 bits, you have to put this S-curve to fit the data into your viewable format. And that's where one of the great things I like about red is that red gives you the full raw data. So it allows the user, and let me pause and say, okay, let me say what I was going to say. It allows the user how you want to tailor your stuff. Before I go there, I just want to point one more thing. This S-curve also does a very interesting thing, which is that now you have compressed the top end, you have compressed the bottom end. In other words, you have put something low, gain at the top, low gain at the bottom, because it doesn't matter as much. Now, in mid-level, which is where our eye is most sensitive to, which is where you get the most information, it's very critical what gain you put in. Because the more gain you put in there, you have more handle on what you need to do. And that's what the S-curve allows you to do. You can choose the shape of the top and the bottom and make the middle range, whatever you define as the middle range, and gain it up as much as you want. And that's why it's a post-processing function. And that's why you want to have control over it as much as possible. So red followed the philosophy that let's just ship the data out, linear data, after some compression. You let the user at the back end, when they're doing post-processing, that is when they're doing color correction, put these curves in the way they see fit. Because what is mid-level for one camera company or for one filmmaker may not be the same for another. Case in point, Scorsese versus Soderbergh. Soderbergh shoots more deep. Okay? So, let's say that, okay, let's ship it out. Let the filmmaker do it. That's where the problem also comes in. It's very much like, when TV was first introduced here, it had 3 buttons, maybe 2 knobs. Volume, color. You go to America, and you have a whole menu of contrast, this, that, blue, green, and you all of a sudden, you played with all the knobs and you completely screwed up the image. Okay? That's a problem with red data. You can take the data, and if you don't have a good post-processing facility, it takes this much effort to screw up an image. And it takes that much more effort to get a good image. But when you get a good image, you get a great image. While Arri and Sony has followed exactly the opposite strategy. They said that, okay, we are going to sell it to the 90% of our customers who won't care for those fine details, but for the 90% of the customers, we go 90% into it. And so we will put in an S-curve of our own and bake it into the data. And that's what I'm going to do. So the data that you get from the data that you get from Arri and Sony already have an S-curve built onto it, and they call it 12-bit log, which is not the raw data that's coming out of the sensor. While for red, you get the raw data. So what happens is that when you take a red data and you just display it, off the bat it looks worse than what you get of a Sony and Arri. And don't be fooled by it. So yes.
At the time of shooting, you also look at the images as an MC.
Very, very good question. So I just wanted to show you that the top image without the S-curve looks kind of dull, and the bottom image looks bright. That's what you do with the S-curve. Anyway, leaving that, it's a fantastic question. The question is, if you have heard, that when you shoot, what do you do? And this is the $1 million question. So how does a DP light a scene? With film, it was all with exposure meters. And everybody had an idea in their mind what you're going to get. The DPs knew it, or cinematographers knew it. So they could, based on their experience, and use that light to get the right look, and then the film did its job. With digital, you have way more controls. So what you do, and this is true for practically all of them, all Red, Sony, Alexa. And again, I'm talking about Red, Sony, Alexa purely because I'm talking more on the feature film domain rather than the lower end domain. That you can actually apply a look. So what you do is, in your camera, so the camera has 2 parts, more or less. Each one is different a little bit, but more or less. One path is where you're displaying the data, and the other path where you're storing the data. Especially Red follows it very rigorously. The path where they store the data, which is stored as R3D files, nothing is applied. That's just pure raw data. On the path which you display and which you see on a screen, and probably with a good screen, and I would recommend anybody shooting a digital movie, have a good quality, color corrected monitor on set. Don't skimp on that. Because that almost is your ground truth, rather than your exposure meter. Okay? So what you do is that you apply the look, which is all of these curves, and there are a bunch of other curves that Red has as well. Basically to do with how you handle the low light level, mid light level, and the top light level. And what color you really want. Because color of our skin, you can make subtle variations in that. So you get your right look in. And once you are satisfied on your color calibrated monitor, this is the look that I want, you save that look. When you save the R3D data, along with that you pass this look data or this metadata along with it. In the back end, when you're doing your digital processing, or that is when you're doing your grading or color correction or PI, you get the raw data and you apply this look to it, and that's what you display as the first, you almost get a first print out of it, the first light print. And now comes the DP and the director, and they sit and say, yeah, that's good, but I want to make this look more warm. Let's bring more warmth to it. But that look, what it allows, taking in 90% of the game. In other words, with red especially, you define your look. It requires a little more active work by the DP, but it gives you a break too. So the DP finds a look for the camera, and you can almost do it scene by scene, although that would be huge. You probably won't do it, you probably do it for a large chance of your movie. You find a look, you bake that in, and at the post-processing end, at the post end, you recall that look, apply it to your data, and now what you see is what you get. Or what you saw is what you get. Or you can use a generic look from there. They have a bunch of, like when you choose the red, again, I should have had that, but I don't have it. If you have used red Cine X, which is to capture the data, it defines a color space and a gamma space. The color space is the color signs that you're using, and the gamma is what kind of, that shape of the curve, the S curve that you apply. They have a baked-in values. And that's a good place to start.
Was there any sort of a conflict with creative aspect as well as technical aspect?
Is there ever any problem with the creative guys and the technologists? Never. The technologists, the creative guys are, of course, there's always problems. There's a huge problem. There are huge issues. I cannot say that I like the red look that they have built in as much as I like the acting. So it's an interesting situation. Annie, I think, their color science is very good because they're a very old company. So they know color science very, very well. I find with Arri, it's much quicker to get to a color code than with red. Red needs a little bit more tweaking, which is sort of our learning that we are. But red allows you more controllability than Arri does. You take your pick. As a filmmaker, do you want to go for, do you want to think with somebody else's head or with your head? No, I'm just kidding. Seriously, it's that. It's how much of a control freak you are versus how much borrowed head you're going to use. That's what it boils down to. Sony still, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, everybody standing here would say something different. Sony still hasn't got their color science right. Of these three cameras, Sony has the more video look. And more sharp, it's very sharp. It doesn't have that softness, which both Arri and red has. So, how are we doing on time?
Okay.
Should I stop now or go on?
20 minutes.
Go on.
So
hoping it says stop.
basically, so the movie still happens on the editing table.
I won't say that.
With your all these corrections, everything happening there.
I won't say that. Well, first of all, it's not happening in the editing table. If you're talking about the look, it's not happening in the editing table. It's happening in the post and with the DI. Editor is working with the
No, I'm talking about that post editor, not the guy who cuts the.
DI.
Yeah.
DI. Look, here is my point. If you shoot crap, and then you bring in the best technologist, you'll get crap at the output. It's very difficult to put input crap and the best software and get anything but crap at the output. So the DP has to shoot the thing right. The question now is that, having said that the DP has shot it right, how much control you have at the back end to get the look that you want. Some scenes you might want to, cool it down more. Some scenes you might want to soften more. Some scenes you might want to add warmth. Some scenes where you might want to get false colors. How much of that latitude do you have? Versus getting your colors right. Now, the first thing is that if your skin tone is wrong, no matter how good the sunset is, you won't care.
Right.
That's where you're going to fail. So that's the point I'm making, that if you have done things right, how much room you have to play in the back end. Right? So DP has to know how to shoot for it. And that's what I was going to come to. That's probably an interesting thing. So let me not show the split right now. Let me just talk about this. So, a given scene, very easily kind of 20, 22 stops of range, so given the brightest light to the darkest. Very easy. Your camera has maybe 12 to 14 stops, like if you use red without the HDRX mode, which I'll come to in a second. Maybe 12 stops, 12 plus, adding maybe 14, 13 plus. So how do you handle those additional 8, 10 stops that you have in your scene? How do you handle it? How does a DP handle it? How does a filmmaker handle it? Do you throw that away? Or what do you do? So I would let me go through. Let me not talk about this here because this probably doesn't belong here. I can again talk about it separately, but so we'll come to that. So remember what we said is that the whole trick is that you don't blow your highlights, don't clip your shadows. How do you do it? So let's say you look at a histogram. The histogram is say between 0 and 100. If you put a scale of 0 and 100 of the amount of signals that you get from your camera, how much of the scene has a value of 100? How much of the scene has a value of 50? How much of the scene has a value of 20? So it kind of gives you an idea of where the most of the signal is. So like here, if you just put in your ISO number or whatever, you see most of the signal is in the 20% range. Very little signal in the 100% range, very little signal in the 50% range, and so on. And so this histogram is kind of telling you a typical value. So what you see here is that the scale is 0 to 100, so it's the normalized value. You take the 16-bit and normalize it to 0 to 100. 0 means dark, 100 means fully bright, saturated. And maybe most of your signal is in the 18% range. So, that's what you should have, sort of. At the top end, what you see, there are a large number of signals that are at number 100, which means they're saturated. That means those signals are gone. You can't recover any signal from them. And there are a bunch of signals that are low light. You see that increase that has happened in the histogram, which means that the dark is also clipped. So you've done exactly opposite of what you want to do. You have clipped your highlight, you've blown your highlight, clipped your shadows. There is large number of values on 100, large number of values on 0. You would like to make sure that everything is between, say, 5 and 95. Which means that everything is kind of being exposed, everything is responding to light. That's what you want to do. So, one way of doing it, of course, is you can, if you want to handle the highlight, you can stop it down. So you can stop it down and you see all your highlights slowly coming into the picture. As you see in this histogram, the 100 at the 100 point, there's no signal left, everything is great. You think, all right, I've done it. But hell no, you have shifted this whole thing to the left. Now you have underexposed your scene. Not good. Especially where your main subject is, which is at the 18% level. So what you do is that, or what we did, is we added ND filters to actually bring the highlight in and added film exposed by subject properly. Now doing this, what you have done is that of course you've changed the shape of the histogram a little bit. But you now handle your highlights, you're not blowing your highlights, you're not clipping your shadows. But what you have done is you've increased your light budget. So that's why I said in the beginning that digital being low light, and here is a kicker. This is not a problem in low light. It's a problem because the problem is coming because you don't have latitude at the top end. Right? What does that mean? That means in daylight, you need to add more light, which is the most expensive light. Right? That's the most expensive light that you can add. It's not tungsten that you're adding. It's cheaper lights. HMIs are way more expensive than your tungstens, and HMIs are difficult to find. Like when I was shooting in Bengal, I was having trouble finding flicker-free HMIs. So, this is the problem that you have to deal with. But if you can deal with it, you get beautiful results, as I have shown you. There are a couple of other techniques also, but again, I'm not going to talk too much about it. So let me show you. This is a scene which had a pretty high dynamic range, and we managed to keep it under control using this. I think this is the one. These lights are kind of coming in the way, but you see the back was large amounts of light, and then inside kind of a shack, so the light is pretty low. So to and you're not getting the full range of it, to handle both the background, which is bright, and the inside of the shack, which is kind of dim, we have to use this kind of method. Now this is easy. This is different. But of course, again, these lights are coming in the way. Otherwise, you see much better. If you see it on my screen, you see the whole thing much better. But those are things that you would do in order to handle your exposure latitude that you have. All right. I don't need to show it, but I just want to show the idea behind it. Okay. All right. I think this probably is. Oh, I want to talk about one more thing which you should be very, very careful about. Let me talk about it. If you're shooting with most digital sensors, you have to be careful about shooting outdoors and using ND filters. Here is the point. Silicon, which is the material that's used to collect light, responds not only to green, red, and blue, which is where our light, our information is, but also to infrared, which we don't want to see. Infrared makes the whole picture look kind of unfocused, diffused, without color content, because you're adding infrared which has no color content in the scene. The colors look wrong, colors look faded. Now, most sensors actually use what is called an IR cut filter to cut that IR off, so that it doesn't come in your camera. Now, here is what happens. Suppose you go outside and you put ND filters. The ND filters is going to cut your visible light, but it will not cut your IR light. Okay? So if you put a lot of ND, like ND3, ND6, so you're cutting down light by a large amount of visible light. Now you're bringing in light that has way more infrared component, which can no longer be ignored, because even after the IR cut filter, what's left over is equivalent to the amount of light, visible light that you get after ND6 filtering, or even ND3 filtering. And now your whole picture looks more washed out. So when you shoot with digital, if you're going outdoors and if you're using ND filter more than, I'd say even 0.9, make sure you carry your own IR cut filter. This is something that, and IR cut filters are not readily available. It's something that you should keep in mind. So let me show you, what it looks like. And this is one scene from my film where I had to shoot one day without the IR cut filter. Yes, sir.
Is it necessary to add a hot mirror also?
You did. I did without the hot mirror,
Yeah.
but I had a Tiffin IR cut filter. That was good enough.
IR without a hot mirror is good enough.
Yeah. Tiffin was good enough, which is just a transmitted one. Good enough. But the point is that you have cut down, you have increased your relative IR components. So even cutting down by a factor of 2, 3 is good. So you don't need a very good IR cut filter at that point. Unless of course you're using ND12 or something, then then that's another story. But most of the cases we use a different IR cut filter, and that was fine.
And it calls for no compensation.
Sorry, say that again?
It calls for no compensation either.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this scene, again, these are not really the ways